will not have to go on injured reserve. Kupp, however, will have to wear a boot cast for a couple of weeks to help treat his sprained left ankle. Kupp was injured Sunday in the Rams' loss at Arizona. If the Rams had put Kupp on IR, he would have missed at least 4 games. Kupp will not play in Sunday's home opener against San Francisco. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Tavis is under attack. I can't get his radio station on my transistor. I'm getting the Asian station that he's right around, but they're not letting KBLA 1580 come in. I'm not getting the black man. So let Tavis know he's under attack. Cyber attack, racist attack, fascist attack, but he's under attack. And they doing something to disrupt his radio station so they won't get the truth out to us.
Hey, it's Tavis. We appreciate all that love, let me tell you, because we may very well be under attack on all sides. Just because you don't believe in conspiracy theories don't mean they ain't after you. But in reality, sometimes stuff happens with the signal from the studio to the tower, which sends our programming to your car, home, office, or your transistor radio. But when you download the KBLA 1580 app, the sound is clear as a bell all day, all night, anywhere in the world, from Los Angeles to Lagos. So we love all of our listeners, no matter how you hear us. But when you download the KBLA 1580 app and hear that richness, you'll wonder why you didn't do it sooner. But don't take my word for it. Download the KBLA 1580 app right now. I'm Tavis Smiley, and I approve this message.
KBLA Talk 1580, and class is in session, y'all. So prepare to get a little smarter, or a lot. So excited to have him back on the show. He holds the Moores Professorship of History and African American Studies. He has got a Ph.D. from Columbia, a J.D. from UC Berkeley, and a B.A. from Princeton. He's written numerous books, which you can find pretty much wherever you get your books. And you can see his lectures on YouTube. I'm talking about Dr. Gerald Horne. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
And that, of course, is Dr. Gerald Horne's Walk-On Music, the Michael Jackson song. Evidence of such. A lot of things to talk about that you highlighted when we were off the air, and some of them we're just not tracking. Or just getting edged out of the national news. And I want to start with Sudan, because between the presidential election and what's happening in Gaza and the crazy U.S. domestic news cycle, you don't hear much about Sudan except as a kind of a counter talking point to Gaza.
Well, what's happening is that it's one of the most significant and profound humanitarian disasters taking place right now on planet Earth. Famine is spreading. The conflict stems from a dispute within the armed forces. That is to say, the Rapid Support Forces, which is the kind of Navy SEALs of the overall Sudanese armed forces, or fighting with the Sudanese armed forces. And then you have outside powers involved. That is to say, Egypt is supporting the military. United Arab Emirates, which, by the way, is playing a more muscular role in Africa, is supporting the rapid support forces. And so it's a real disaster. And part of it stems from U.S. policy, because recall that when Sudan had a more stable regime just a few years ago, their arm was twisted and they were forced to sign Mr. Trump's Abraham Accords, which called for normalization of relations with Israel, which was not very popular in Sudan, not to mention forking over millions of dollars from the Treasury for payments for supposed wrongdoing that the Sudan regime had been involved in. And that weakened the civilian administration, which led to this internal military conflict.
So would you call that a proxy war between Egypt and the United Arab Emirates? I mean, if they're backing opposite sides in this African conflict?
Well, to a degree it is. But there's no doubt that it's also a struggle internally for power.
Mm-hmm.
Before the secession of South Sudan, which took place under the George W. Bush years, Sudan was the largest country by territory on the African continent. Sudan, particularly in the south, has substantial oil deposits. And so there is reason for these internal forces to be going after each other.
And so, I mean, and it seems like that region of Sudan, which I say region, it was one nation, now it's two, right? Has been, struggling with having a stable government for going way back, right?
It certainly has. I should also mention a Black American angle. That is to say that when South Sudan seceded from the larger Sudan, it also split the Black American community. That is to say that in the South, you have a significant number of Christians, and many Black Christians, including T.D. Jakes, Reverend Sharpton, were quite supportive of their co-religionists in South Sudan, whereas you have many Black American Muslims who were supportive of the regime in Khartoum. And so what happened in Sudan did not necessarily stay in Sudan.
Mm. And I mean, as far as like U.S. policy, what would be helpful as opposed to hurtful?
Well, the problem with the U.S. policy is the United States is not seen as an honest broker. I mentioned the...
Surprise.
They tried to organize peace talks in Switzerland just
right.
a few weeks ago, and one side didn't show up because they do not see the United States as an honest broker because of their support for Israel. And it's difficult for the United States to play a role. What we'd like to see is more empowering of the African Union, and for the African Union, headquartered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to play a more muscular role. But right now, that does not seem to be happening.
Mm. You mentioned in passing United Arab Emirates playing a greater role in Africa. There goes something I'm not tracking. In what way, and what are the implications of that?
Well, the United Arab Emirates, first of all, it has a lot of money to throw around,
yeah,
which obviously makes you increasingly influential. I think the problem is that oftentimes they do not necessarily need to be involved in all of these different conflicts. I mean, for example, there is evidence to suggest that they're involved in this conflict in the Horn of Africa, which is really a crisis that is on the verge of erupting. I'm speaking of the conflict ostensibly between Egypt and Ethiopia over Ethiopia building this Grand Renaissance Dam that Egypt claims is threatening its lifeblood, speaking of the Nile River. Ethiopia wanted an outlet to the sea, so it cut a deal with a breakaway province from Somalia, known as Somaliland. That infuriated Somalia. Somalia is very close to Turkey or Turkey, which means fundamentally that Ethiopia is being encircled because Eritrea, which broke away from Ethiopia a few decades ago, is also part of this encirclement. And apparently the United Arab Emirates has thrown its weight around with regard to this. And this could be a real disaster for Africa, even more significant than the Sudan crisis, because Ethiopia is one of the most populous nations on the continent. Its economy has been growing. Its leader, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, recall he received the Nobel Prize a few years ago, perhaps prematurely because of the settlement of the Eritrean crisis. So there's a lot to wring your hands about.
Yeah, in Ethiopia, I mean, they're really proud. I've visited Ethiopia. They're really proud of the fact that they were never colonized, even though they were occupied for some time by the Italians. And you can definitely see the impact of that. But it seems like one of the reasons we had such high hopes for Ahmed was because he was going to bring peace, and that has not turned out to be the case at all.
Not at all. And another worrisome factor that I should have mentioned is that there is evidence to suggest that in order to gain leverage over Ethiopia, Egypt will be supporting the internal antagonists of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, of which there are many. Recall that it was only a year or so ago that a bloody conflict was resolved between Tigrayan province and the Tigrayan leadership and the central leadership in Addis Ababa. There's evidence to suggest that the Egyptians might try to reignite that conflict by supporting the Tigrayans. So,
but Tigray is part of Ethiopia, technically. It's not a separate nation.
Not at all. But recall that before Abiy Ahmed came to power, the Tigrayans were fundamentally ruling the entire country. And so they've been sidelined, and then many of the leadership in Tigray province are not happy about that.
Yeah, I bet not. Well, and that is concerning. I mean, because what you've just laid out is an intricate, puzzle of all these countries that are interlocking and that have their own different alliances that can continue to destabilize that region for years to come.
And also pay attention to the travel itinerary of many of these leaders. Recall that it was just a few days ago that General al-Sisi, the leader of Egypt, he was in Ankara, Turkey. They have had a conflict going back to 2013 when General al-Sisi overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood leader, Mohammed Morsi, who was very close to Turkey or Turkey. And the fact that Egypt and Turkey are kissing and making up, I'm sure Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was looking at that with a jaundiced eye, because he may have reason to suspect that given Turkey's role as the power behind the throne in Somalia, that Egypt, Somalia, and Turkey will now be conspiring against Ethiopia.
Okay. My Africa tracking often has to do with where can I travel safely, since I've tried to go to all 54 countries. But certainly there are implications. You say, oh, it's foreign policy, but it always impacts us at home, and we always have an influence on what's happening there. When we come forward, I want to talk about China's role. We're always mentioning it, but not fully understanding it in this Africa-China summit. We're talking with Dr. Gerald Horne, and you, if you want to get on the phone, 800-920-1580. We are KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Hey, LA residents, it's planting season and the perfect time to get shade trees growing around your home. LADWP and City Plants are giving every resident up to 7 free trees. That's right, 7 free trees delivered right to your door. Trees are great for the environment, help improve air quality, and can help you save on your bill when you use less air conditioning to stay cool indoors. Learn more at ladwp.com/free trees. That's ladwp.com/free trees.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chuchas Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
I need your dollar, that's what I need.
KBLA Talk 1580 celebrates small businesses, the enduring lifeblood of our community, with the launch of the KBLA SMB Marketplace. For the first time, small to medium-sized businesses will have an opportunity to promote their goods and services on KBLA and take advantage of our powerful reach and local marketing power. The SMB Marketplace is hosted exclusively on KBLA1580.com and is accessible from all our social media channels. Whether you're a small mom and pop restaurant, a car dealership, or a professional practitioner, we invite you to join in this new KBLA Talk 1580 initiative to promote your business. As a Black-owned small business, you don't want to miss this unique opportunity to gain new customers on KBLA Talk 1580. For more information, contact us today at smb@kbla1580.com. That's smb@kbla1580.com. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
And if I share with you my story, would you share your dollar with me? Time to get it.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
Talking with Dr. Gerald Horne, and Molly Bell's in the chat saying she's reading your books in spurts. That sounds like me, Dr. Horne. I have 2 or 3 of your books that it's somewhere in the middle of or at the beginning of reading them. And I'm like, oh, when I get all the way through this book, I can interview Dr. Horne about it. But I really enjoy reading your books. It's just a lot of times I have to read a page or a passage over again, because you favor very big words and very dense concepts that take a while to go into my brain.
Well, fair enough. The problem in writing these books is that, like, I remember when I was writing the book about the Watts Uprising of 1965, and you don't want to use the same word over and over again.
No, you don't.
Fire or conflagration or disturbance. So you keep searching for words so that you don't sound repetitive.
Yeah, well, you never sound that, and I always enjoy them. It just takes me a minute. For me, it's worth it. The one that I'm mostly working on right now is Armed Struggle. Which it's a big one. Panthers and communists, black nationalists and liberals in Southern California through the 60s and 70s. Fascinating, though. Really, really fascinating.
Yeah, that book took a lot of time. And, of course, as I say in the introduction, I was involved in some of what I was writing about, which gives the book a particular character.
Yeah. What are you working on now?
I'm writing a book as we speak on slavery in Washington, D.C., which, of course, was very consequential because at the same time, Washington, D.C. was supposed to be the headquarters of freedom and liberty. You had enslaved Africans sold within hollering distance of the Capitol.
Yeah, it's amazing all of the places where the institution of slavery weaseled and seeped its way into pretty much everywhere. I mean, folks say California is not a slave state, but the task force study and things that have come from that just prove that so soundly. I didn't even realize that most of the gold mining that was done by the so-called 49ers was actually done by their slaves. Didn't realize that the first governor of California tried to ban black people from living in the state at all. So.
Oh, sure. Because when you had 1849 and the so-called discovery of gold, you had a number of white Southerners who came to Northern California with their enslaved Africans in tow so that they could work on their behalf.
Yeah, just these are just not the things we see when we see the gold rush portrayed, that's for sure. So we were talking about Africa, and I wanted to get to the piece about China. Africa-China summit just took place, and the Chinese president pledged like $50 billion, I think, in funding over 3 years. What is significant about the Africa-China summit? And I mean, $50 billion, what is that meant to do? It's a lot of money. What is it buying?
Well, I think the issue is that relations between China and the United States are headed for a downturn. Not only China and the United States, but China, the European Union, China and Canada, et cetera. So China is looking for new markets for its exports, which means that it is determined to build up the productive forces, particularly in a country like Ethiopia, which has over 100 million people. There's a straight shot from China through the Indian Ocean to the coast of East Africa. But you need to realize also that at the same time that China was hosting 46 plus African heads of state and government just a few days ago, Indonesia, the largest predominantly Muslim country, was trying to do the same thing during the same time period. I've already talked about Turkey playing a major role in African nations that have substantial Muslim populations, of which there are many. And that's not to mention the role of Russia in Africa, the role of France in Africa, which is retreating, particularly in the Sahel states, speaking of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And so Africa is a kind of prize right now. And you might have noticed that the United States just decided that they're going to accede to 2 permanent seats at the top table, the United Nations Security Council, for Africa. Now, of course, no veto power, unlike what the United States wills, but still that is a significant concession.
So, I mean, it's not just the human resources or the minerals and natural resources, it's also the markets.
Oh, absolutely, it's the markets. I mean, for example, what you see already is that a number of China's building these electric vehicles that are way below the cost of a Tesla. You know, a Tesla can cost, what, $50,000, $70,000?
Right, and your dignity.
Not to mention your dignity.
Yeah.
But China is marketing electric vehicles that are being sold for $10,000.
Wow.
For example.
Let me get one of those.
And well, it's difficult because tariffs are being placed on those Chinese electric vehicles coming to the United States market. That is to say, a tax to raise the prices, which means that China will have to find buyers in other markets such as Africa.
Okay, really quick, because I don't want to go veering off on a tangent here, which I tend to do when I'm talking to you. But explain tariffs, because, you know, VP Kamala Harris is calling it a tax. Trump is making it sound like when we impose tariffs, we get money from them. Explain what a tariff really is.
So a tariff is a tax. That is to say, take these electric vehicles. The United States is fundamentally barring them by saying that if they come into the L.A. Long Beach port, there's going to be 100% tax placed on them, so the price rises, perhaps a 300% tax. And Kamala Harris is right, because either A, with regard to certain smaller consumer items, what happens is that the exporter basically raises the price. And so it contributes to inflation. Mr. Trump has this idea that he can cut taxes across the board in the United States and then make up the shortfall with tariffs against China, against other trading partners. But those trading partners will either A, stop sending their goods here, or B, they'll just raise the prices, which means that you and myself will have to pay the ultimate cost.
Mm. Okay, yeah. So back to this China-Africa summit. What other takeaways did you have from that, which is just recently wrapped, by the way?
Well, first of all, it's the politics. I mean, because of colonialism, there are, 53, 54 African nations. There are about 193 nations represented at the United Nations and other multilateral bodies, such as the World Bank, for example. And so by cultivating these African nations, China thinks that it's getting diplomatic and political support from these African nations, and the United Nations will be having the General Assembly opening within a day or two, and we'll be able to take the temperature to see if they're on the right track in that regard.
Okay, well, we only have a minute and a half here till news, traffic, and sports, and I do want to talk a little bit about the election and what's happening with the over in MAGA world after this. But when you said markets, I mean, I guess I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it kind of, clicks in with the fact that China is building roads and trains.
And airports. Recall that when Kamala Harris went to Africa a year or two ago, every airport she landed at in Accra, Ghana, Lusaka, Zambia, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, was either subsidized or designed by Chinese interests. And so in order to develop markets, if you're going to sell electric vehicles, it would be nice to have highways on which these electric vehicles can run,
right.
for example.
Right, and trains to transport all those, low-cost plastic items that they like to sell.
Exactly. Mm. And another big takeaway coming from the summit was this railway running from Zambia in the heart of Africa, where Kamala Harris visited, to Dar es Salaam on the Indian Ocean coast. And that, too, brings us back to what many of us have been looking at, which is the transport of African minerals, particularly copper from Zambia, into the Chinese market, not only into the Chinese market, but into the Saudi market, et cetera.
Man, everybody was talking about that highway when we were in Tanzania this year. We're talking with Dr. Gerald Horne and you. This is KBLA Talk 1580, 40 acres and a mic.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is back on the campaign trail after an apparent assassination attempt over the weekend in Florida. Trump brought up the alleged attempt on his life at a campaign rally in New York Wednesday and said he felt like God had saved him so that he can make America great again. The Federal Reserve is announcing its first interest rate cut since the COVID pandemic. Wall Street investors say it's not a typical rate cut with the presidential election just weeks away. Ocean First Bank has agreed to pay $15 million to resolve charges of discrimination by redlining communities in Monmouth, Ocean, and Middlesex counties. The alleged redlining targeted predominantly Hispanic, Black, and Asian communities. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Think It Up is an initiative to activate student-powered, teacher-led learning projects. Students and teachers, how can you spark great learning experiences in your classrooms today? Join at thinkitup.org.
Is this the dagger?
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
For the 11th straight season, the Dodgers have won 90 games. They reached number 90 last night with an 8-4 win at Miami. The Dodgers got home runs from Tommy Edman, Will Smith, and Enrique Hernandez. Shohei Ohtani stole his 49th base this season. He needs 1 stolen base and 2 home runs to become the first player in Major League Baseball history with 50 stolen bases and 50 homers. The Dodgers have 10 games left in the regular season for Ohtani to make history. The Rams were told by medical staff that wide receiver Cooper Kupp will not have to go on injured reserve. Kupp, however, will have to wear a boot cast for a couple of weeks to help treat his sprained left ankle. Kupp was injured Sunday in the Rams' loss at Arizona. If the Rams had put Kupp on IR, he would have missed at least 4 games. Kupp will not play in Sunday's home opener against San Francisco. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Hi, this is Councilman Curran Price, inviting you to be part of our city's legendary musical history at the 29th Annual Central Avenue Jazz Festival on September the 21st from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. For decades, the Central Avenue Jazz Festival has honored this historic corridor's unparalleled contribution to jazz. Enjoy a day filled with jazz, blues, and Latin jazz across 3 stages, featuring performances by Chief Ajua, the John Beasley Big Band, and Las Chicas. Indulge in a variety of delicious foods from barbecue to Asian fusion, and explore from a unique mix of vendors and more. The festival is free to attend, and it takes place on Central Avenue between King Boulevard and Vernon Avenue. Parking is limited, so Metro and rideshare are recommended. For more information, visit centralavejazzfest.com. That's centralavejazzfest.com. See you on the 21st.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues?
Who are you?
Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Hey, checking in?
This is not just your flu shot appointment at Walgreens.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is getting your entire family vaccinated in one trip.
Hey, Mom?
And a snack on the way out. Get flu shots for everyone in your family, together. Schedule appointments online today. This is wellness made easy. Walgreens.
Vaccine subject to availability and for ages 3+. State and health-related restrictions may apply.
Looks like Bobby needs a ride again.
Grab the keys. Let's take our auntie to the swap meet.
Grab the keys.
Whether you're giving rides or hauling gear, do it all in a Chevy SUV. Head to your local Chevy dealer, where well-qualified buyers get 1.9% APR on all 2024 Silverado 1500, Blazer EV, Equinox, Trailblazer, and Colorado models. Chevrolet, together, let's drive.
1.9% APR for 36 months. Monthly payment is $28.60 for every $1,000 you finance. Example down payment 12.7%. Must finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available with lease and some other offers. Taking retail delivery by 9/30/24.
Tavis Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition with powerful new contributions from today's leading voices. This 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America 20 years later today. This is KBLA Talk 1580, where everybody is somebody and nobody is a stranger. You belong here.
We're talking with author, historian, professor, and YouTube star, Dr. Gerald Horne. Dr. Horne, before we move on to my other long list of questions, explain why you call Turkey Turkia.
Well, I'm trying to call this nation what it calls itself.
Ah.
I think that the reason it decided to change the pronunciation of their name is because Turkey, of course, is associated with this bird that we eat for Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
It has a derogatory connotation in English, so they say, call us Turkia rather than Turkey, and I decided to follow them.
Okay, let's talk about the Uhuru 3. Explain the story of the Uhuru 3 and the recent verdicts.
So there was a trial recently in the Tampa Bay, Florida area of leaders of a group called the Uhuru Movement, which is affiliated with the African People's Socialist Party led by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, formerly known as Joseph Waller. They were accused of being Russian agents. They were acquitted on the charge of being Russian agents, but they were convicted on the charge of conspiring with Russia. Now, how you square that circle, I'm not sure. But in any case, they saw it as a free speech issue, as they thought they were being persecuted because of their opposition to U.S. policy with regard to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And as they see it, they're being punished for being political dissidents.
And as the courts see it, they're going to jail?
Well, of course, they're going to appeal, but certainly if the appeals fail, they will be doing hard time.
Mm. And this was the result of FBI raids on their offices and homes.
Yes, they have headquarters not only in the Tampa Bay area, specifically St. Petersburg, but also in St. Louis. And it was in the wee hours of the morning that their headquarters were raided. They had the little red dot cased on their foreheads, weapons, for example, which is quite intimidating, to put it mildly. And it's a very unfortunate situation because, as you know, I've been complaining for years that we need to see more Black Americans involved in foreign policy, that the reason the United States can stumble into these conflicts in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, supporting Israel, is because of an absence of Black Americans, generally speaking, from the foreign policy front. But now you see why there's an absence, because these folks might be going to jail fundamentally because of their opposition to the war in Ukraine.
Do you think that this sends a chilling message to other people who consider themselves socialists, communists, democratic socialists, or who simply oppose U.S. foreign policy?
Oh, absolutely, it does. As the saying used to go in the bad old days, you only have to beat one slave to keep the entire plantation in line. And certainly, with the flimsy evidence that was brought forward to convict Uhuru 3, it sends a very chilling message. Nobody wants to go to jail, and certainly you don't want to go to jail because of some foreign policy issue which many people do not either know about or care about.
Yeah. So I guess tracking it, paying attention, and having a lawyer's number handy is, what do you do if you're an activist? Because certainly if you all, they all, I'm saying you all because you live in Texas, if you all elect Donald Trump, this type of thing will escalate.
Oh, it certainly will. And you probably saw that article in the New York Times about people making plans to expatriate Mr. Trump is elected. That is to say, to move outside of the United States, for example. And I have to confess, I'm one of the ones who are considering that particular approach.
Yeah, I have a couple of places where I could go. But, I always feel like I'm team stay and fight. I think you probably are too. I know for sure it's in my DNA.
Oh, sure. But recall that after the raid by John Brown, who led an armed uprising against slavery in October 1959, Frederick Douglass was being hunted he left the country and didn't come back until the Civil War started. And so,
Yeah, sometimes you got to lay low. Ask Paul Robeson, right?
Exactly. A tactical retreat can be an assurance of continuing good health.
Well, I may end up, just like China, glad that I created ties in the motherland. It's a big continent with lots of places to hide. Yeah, and speaking of Drumpf, Mr. Drumpf, as I like to call him by his original name, you have some concerns about the Trump base, and what, I do too, because I feel like this anti-immigrant strain has reeled in some black folks and some Latinos who are like, I got mine. I don't need you here too. It's this crabs in a barrel approach, which seems to be pretty effective.
Well, it's all well and good to denounce Mr. Trump, and I stand second to none in my denunciation of him. But at the end of the day, he got 63 million votes at 2016, 75 million votes in 2020, probably a similar amount in 2024. As we all know, because of the Electoral College, the deck is stacked against any non-conservative. Recall that Hillary Rodham Clinton got 3 million more votes than he did and lost. Mr. Biden got 7 million more votes than he did, but a shift in about maybe 70,000 votes could have led to a loss on his part. It's estimated that if the Harris team wants to prevail, they probably have to get 8 million more votes than Mr.
That's
Trump, which is a very
crazy. That's insane.
It's absolutely ridiculous. But of course, the conservatives don't want to get rid of the Electoral College because they feel that it benefits them.
That's pretty much what it was put in there for, right?
Well, absolutely. It was put in to help the enslaving states, and now it's helping the descendants of the enslaving states, starting, for example, with Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. And then, of course, there are the states where the indigenous question still is relevant, speaking of the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming. For example, in those states, a vote there is really more valuable than a vote in California, for example. I mean, Wyoming only has about, 700,000 people, and it gets 3 electoral votes. California has 40 million people, but the proportion to the population is weighed in Wyoming's favor.
Yeah, Wyoming also gets, the same number of senators. They get 2 senators, and we get 2 senators. So it seems like, I know there's that a lot, I think it's 13 states that have trigger laws where if majority of states pass laws to get rid of the Electoral College, that they will automatically, those laws will go into effect. But it seems like a pretty much of a long shot. Would statehood for D.C. and Puerto Rico, if they want it, would that change the balance?
Not appreciably, but I'm in favor of both. But once again, the conservatives, they're reading the same newspapers that we're reading.
Yeah.
And if they think that it's going to change the balance against them, of course, they will oppose it by any means necessary.
Yeah. Oh, that's not a cheery scenario. Dr. Gerald Horne, we are starting to see more and more polling that seems to be hopeful for the Harris-Walz campaign, although, I think any of us who lived through 2016 should know that polling is not the most reliable predictor. What do you think?
Well, I agree. And first of all, you have to take the national polls with a grain of salt, because recall the national polls were showing Hillary Clinton prevailing, and she did prevail.
Yeah.
She got 3 million more votes.
Right.
But it's a 50-plus jurisdiction election. And so what you need to pay attention to are the polls in Pennsylvania, where, by the way, Trump is about 3 to 4 points behind, which is not in his favor. Pay attention to the polls in Georgia, the polls in North Carolina, in Wisconsin, and Michigan, Arizona, and your next-door neighbor, Nevada in particular.
Yeah, that's a mystery. Why Nevada would even consider Trump. We're talking to Dr. Gerald Horne, and let's see what we can squeeze in before we get out of here. I really do want to hear a little bit more your observations about this election and the implications for some of these foreign policy conversations that we are having, especially when we talk about the scary prospect of a World War III possibly on the horizon. Next on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
For all of us, this generation and the next, there is simply no place in our lives for litter. And yet, it's everywhere we look. And unfortunately, it does belong to all of us. So, let's come together and create a litter-free, clean California, once and for all. Remember to properly dispose of your trash and recycling. Secure truckloads with tarps to keep debris from flying out. Clean out your car when you're at a gas station. Take pride in your community by organizing a cleanup event. Or join a cleanup event near you. Zero litter is the goal. Join us at cleanca.com. That's cleanca.com. Let's do it together. Brought to you by Caltrans. cleanca.com.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months, and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well-trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hey there, it's Karen.
And I'm Ernest. We're the co-hosts of Food for Thought with Karen and Ernest here on KBLA Talk 1580. Make sure you check us out Saturdays at 8 p.m.
And our rebroadcast happens on Sundays at 7 p.m. We'll be talking about the art of dining. We'll be giving food tips, talking to sommeliers, chefs, concierges, all the food influencers. Everything food, everything dining. And sometimes with some of our friends just hanging out and talking food.
And when you listen to our show, we have a segment called Hot Dishes. Sometimes unpopular opinions, but we said what we said and we meant what we meant.
Also, we do food reviews with who's hot and who's not.
Yeah, you make sure you guys check out Food for Thought with Karen and Ernest here on KBLA. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties. Classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio, KBLA Talk 1580.
Let me start here because we can so quickly run out of time. Dr. Gerald Horne, talk to me a little bit about Haiti. Haiti has burst into the news more because of a domestic argument around the demonization of Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. Thank you, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, which has now led to schools being evacuated. Cultural festival had to be canceled because of the attacks and threats against the Haitian community there. Put that in context, in historical context, if you would.
Well, our audience needs to recognize that the hostility, the hatred of Haiti goes back to Haiti having the gumption in 1804 to overthrow slavery and then to chase the enslavers out of the Caribbean. And then going from there to sponsor revolts of the enslaved throughout the Caribbean and to a degree in the United States as well. And when slavery was abolished in this country, the enslavers were not compensated. Now, today we talk about reparations to the descendants of enslaved Africans. The enslaving families think that they should have gotten some sort of reparation in 1865. And so the hatred for Haiti in this country is very deep, is very profound. And this recent flap in Springfield, Ohio, with these absurd allegations about Haitians supposedly eating cats and dogs and pets and geese, and J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee, conceding that he's creating stories out of thin air. It's stories out of thin air. It's one more bit of evidence to suggest this psychotic obsession with this small Caribbean nation.
Yeah, I saw a hilarious post on Instagram with pictures of Donald Trump's two sons and some dead big cats when they were on safari, and saying which foreigners are really killing cats. But I think when we look at that kind of demonization of black people, anti-blackness, and also the foreign policy concerns like Ukraine, Israel, Sudan, Congo, maybe it's not a good time to go third party. Maybe it's a good time, and your concerns about what kind of a margin you really have to win by to actually win, since we don't have at the top, the top of the ticket, one person, one vote democracy. Maybe it's a good time to try to defeat Trump and his brand of fascism, which isn't just him, it's him and all his followers.
Yeah, it's him and almost 80 million people. But once again, because of the Electoral College, there are 50-plus different elections. In the state of Texas, I dare say that Mr. Trump will likely prevail. And so for a person like myself to vote for Cornel West, I don't think that that's necessarily throwing away a vote. I think it's helping to invest in trying to build an alternative to Trumpism. Now, if you're in Nevada, for example, in some of the aforementioned states, it's probably a horse of a different color.
Okay. So I just looked at this New York Times poll, which addresses what you were saying. Well, it's an analysis of various polls, and it says that, according to them, Trump appears to be doing really well nationally, and Harris appears to be making more progress in the battleground states. What do you make of that?
Well, I'd have to look at the polling. I mean, for example, we all know that there are problems with polls in terms of people not picking up when they see that they don't recognize the number, and that makes you wonder if the polling is being skewed in favor of people who are just hungry to have conversations with strangers, for example. So I'm not so sure what to make of that New York Times story, to be frank with you.
Okay. Well, talk to me about World War III. You brought it up, but it's not a stretch to really be worried about that, given what you described at the beginning of the show that's going on in Africa and how that interacts with what's happening in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East. Are we on the brink of World War III?
Well, I hope not. But the only reason I raised it is because right now up for discussion is Britain, possibly joined by the United States, funneling long-range missiles to Ukraine to strike more deeply into Russia. Russia has made it clear that if that takes place, they will not only blame the Ukrainians, they'll blame London and Washington as well. And then there's this bleeding sore that is Israel, Lebanon, Gaza. Folks need to pay attention to these exploding pagers. I understand the solar panels were exploding yesterday. Laptops were exploding. If the Israelis can figure out how to do that sort of thing, I dare say that others will be able to figure it out as well. And then that could cause chaos on planet Earth. If you're afraid to open your laptop in country X, for example.
Yeah. Well, where does that fall in the spectrum of, international law and rules of engagement? I mean, I said at the beginning of the radio show today that to me it seems like if Iran did that, we would call it terrorism. Right.
Well, obviously there's a double standard in terms of international law. I mean, there's no rule-based international order, as the U.S. State Department would try to convince us. There's one set of rules for the United States and its allies, and another set of rules for the antagonists or the so-called enemies of the United States of America. One side, folks are called freedom fighters. The other side, folks are called terrorists.
Mm. So business as usual. Dr. Gerald Horne, we got a minute and a half here. How would you like to spend it?
Well, I think with all of this bad news, culminating with talking about the possibility of World War III, I think there's a lot of good news coming out of Africa. I mean, all of this attention being paid to Africa, all of these summits, not only the Chinese summit, the Indonesian summit, the attempt to build up the infrastructure of Africa, the roads, the bridges, the highways, the airports, educating more African students, not only in China, but in India as well, and in Russia as well. So as one scans the horizon and looks down the road 10 or 20 years, I think it's possible to see a more rosy scenario for the motherland.
Mm. Yeah, that's well said. And tourism, I mean, Africa's becoming now a trendy place to visit. It always has been for Europe and such, but for the United States, the fact that I'm worried about Zanzibar being ruined instead of the fact that no one will go, I mean, in some ways that represents progress too.
Oh, and certainly, and I certainly recommend visiting Cape Town, South Africa. It's one of the more lovely sights on this small planet. It's where two oceans meet, the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. You have mountains, the fabled Table Mountain, which is a sight in and of itself, and very temperate weather, very temperate climate, San Francisco style.
Dr. Gerald Horne, thank you so much for spending the hour with us. I so appreciate you and your work.
Thank you for inviting me.
Next hour, we're talking Diddy. We're going to have a constructive and informative, insightful conversation. That's after news, traffic, and sports. Dr. Gail Wyatt and attorney Nana Jomfi on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Republican President